Las Vegas, late night, early 1966. The kind of hour when the Strip still glows, but the people are already tired. The back exit of the casino isn't meant to be noticed. No marquee, no music, just concrete, cigarette smoke, and the sound of engines never fully shutting off. Drunk tourists drift past without looking. Taxi horns cut the air, impatient, sharp. And in between them stands a boy, 12, maybe younger, his voice already worn thin. "Evening paper! Evening paper!" He's been shouting the same two words all night. Most don't hear him anymore. The papers stay stacked under his arm. Headlines fade under neon. No one stops. Dean Martin steps out last. No bodyguards, no spotlight. Just a coat pulled close, and a man who knows exactly how quickly applause disappears once the doors close. He keeps walking. The boy calls again. Louder this time. Then once more. Rough. Almost breaking. That's when Dean stops. Not for the voice, for the page. He doesn't take the paper right away. He reads it where it is. No ad for a show, no famous name. Just a short column buried low on the front page. A casino worker is dead. No photo. No name. No follow-up promised. Dean Martin looks at the boy. The boy looks back, waiting. Not hopeful. Just used to being ignored. Neither of them knows it yet. But this is the moment the city would rather forget. Because one small headline, read by the wrong man at the wrong exit, is about to quietly cost a lot of people more than money. Let us know where you're watching from, and we hope you enjoy the story. The boy had learned the rhythm of the Strip, the way other kids learned the sound of their own street. He knew when the doors opened wider and when they narrowed. He knew which men walked fast with their eyes down, which women pretended not to hear him, which tourists smiled too early, and then never stopped. He had been standing near that casino entrance long enough to stop counting the nights. "Evening paper," he said. Not loud, not soft, just enough to be heard by someone who wanted to hear. Most didn't. The lights above the marquee washed everything in the same pale glow, turning faces into masks. The boy recognized them anyway. Singers, comedians, men whose names were printed bigger than the news he carried under his arm. They passed him without slowing, coats swinging, laughter trailing behind them like smoke. He didn't chase. He'd learned that too. Dean Martin came out alone. No crowd, no entourage, just a coat pulled tight against the desert night, and that unhurried walk that made it seem like time adjusted itself to him. The boy straightened slightly. Not hopeful, just attentive. "Evening paper," he said again. Dean stopped, not because of the voice, but because of the page. He tilted the paper toward the light, reading the top line without touching it. His eyes didn't scan. They held. The boy waited. He was used to waiting. "That headline true?" Dean asked. "Yes, sir," the boy said. He didn't add anything. Facts didn't need help. Dean nodded once. "How long you been out here tonight?" "Since before sunset." "That's a long shift." The boy shrugged. "It's fine." Dean finally took a paper, not with a flourish, just fingers closing around newsprint. He reached into his pocket. "My dad used to sell these," the boy said suddenly. Not rushed, not rehearsed, just said. Dean paused. "Used to?" he asked. The boy's eyes dropped to the pavement. "He worked construction. Nights I did this. Mornings he did that." Dean didn't interrupt. "They were building the new wing," the boy went on. "Scaffolding slipped. They said it was nobody's fault." The Strip hummed behind them. A door opened. Laughter spilled out, then vanished again. "They said there wasn't a contract," the boy finished. "So there wasn't anything else." Dean looked at the stack under the boy's arm. counted without counting. "I'll take them," he said. "All of them?" The boy frowned. "You don't need—" "I know what I need," Dean said. Not sharp, just settled. The boy hesitated when Dean held out the money. "That's too much." Dean waited. "I mean," the boy corrected himself, "you don't have to." Dean considered this. Then he said, "You got change?" The boy blinked. "Yes, sir." "Then give it to me." It took a second for the boy to understand. He fumbled with the coins, hands stiff from the cold. He placed them carefully into Dean's palm, one by one, as if precision could keep the moment from tipping into something else. Dean folded the papers under his arm. He kept one out. "Do me a favor," he said. "Yes, sir." "Stand by the entrance a while longer. Hand these out." "For free?" Dean nodded. "People read more when they don't have to pay." The boy looked down at the stack, then back up. "Okay." Dean didn't smile. He didn't say anything that sounded like advice. He tucked the single paper into his coat and turned away. As he walked, the boy called after him, not loud. "Sir?" Dean stopped, glanced back. "Thank you," the boy said. "Not for the money. For being seen." Dean gave a small nod. That was all. The boy stepped closer to the door, holding the papers out now, not selling, offering. Most still walked past. A few took one. One man read the headline and slowed. Dean disappeared into the parking lot, the strip lights thinning behind him. The paper in his pocket bent slightly as he moved. He didn't open it yet. Some things, he knew, were heavier once you read them. Dean read the paper in his room, not at the desk, not under the lamp, but standing by the window where the neon from the strip bled through the curtains in restless colors. He unfolded it carefully, smoothing the crease with his palm, as if that might steady what he was about to see. The notice was small, buried low on the page. No photograph. No bold type. One column. 4 short paragraphs. A construction worker had died during the expansion of a casino property. Name withheld. Cause listed as an accidental fall. Investigation concluded. No violations found. Dean read it twice. Then a third time, slower. There was nothing dramatic in the wording. That was the point. It was written to pass unnoticed, to be skimmed and forgotten between sports scores and advertisements. But one line stayed with him, a sentence that mentioned the family had declined to comment. He knew that sentence. He'd seen it before, years ago, attached to other quiet endings. A knock came at the door, soft but certain. It was a reporter he recognized, though they'd never spoken at length. A man who stood like he was always listening for something behind him. "You bought a lot of papers tonight," the reporter said, half smiling, half wary. Dean didn't invite him in. "They were there. That edition wasn't supposed to be." Dean raised an eyebrow. "The print run got cut," the man said. "Pressure. Advertising pressure. You know how it goes." "Whose pressure?" Dean asked. The reporter hesitated just long enough to answer the question anyway. "The same people who own the building where the man fell." Dean looked back at the page. "Why leave the name out?" "Because names stick," the reporter said. "Accidents don't." He shifted his weight. "That casino, the one expanding, it's yours this month." Dean didn't respond. "They didn't want this story," the reporter continued. "They wanted silence. We argued. They compromised. Small notice. No follow-up." "And now?" Dean asked. "Now that issue's gone," the reporter said. "What you bought outside. That was it." After he left, Dean sat down. The room felt smaller with the paper open on the table. Later that evening, backstage, his show manager spoke carefully, as if each word had weight. "Just a heads up," he said. There's some sensitivity around construction matters. Best not to mention anything from the stage. I wasn't planning to, Dean said. Good, the man replied too quickly. Because it's not our business. That phrase stayed with Dean longer than the conversation. He thought of the boy's hands counting change, of the way he'd said there wasn't anything else, like a conclusion already reached. Another call came, this one from someone higher up, voice smooth and distant. A reminder of how many nights were booked, how many people depended on everything running clean and quiet. Vegas likes stability, the voice said, and you're part of that picture. Dean hung up without arguing. He stood again by the window, the city flashing its confidence back at him. He understood the risk. Contracts here were built on cooperation, not defiance. Attention could be expensive. He folded the paper once more and slipped it into the drawer. Not because he was finished with it, because he wasn't. Dean took the service corridor the next night. Not out of habit. Out of intent. The hallway behind the casino was narrow, unfinished in places, with exposed pipes and a smell of dust that never quite left. It was where deliveries came through, where employees smoked between shifts, where the city dropped its mask. He preferred it that way. Less noise, fewer eyes. He expected to see the boy near the exit, pressed close to the wall, papers tucked under his arm like before. He wasn't there. The spot was empty. No stack of newspapers. No quiet voice cutting through the traffic. Just the echo of slot machines bleeding through the concrete and the low hum of generators somewhere below. Dean slowed. A man stood farther down the corridor, leaning against a crate. Older. Thinner. His coat had once been decent. He held a folded paper, creased and recreased until the edges had softened. "You looking for the kid?" the man said, not as a question. Dean stopped. "I might be." The man straightened. "They told him not to come back." "Who did?" "Didn't say," the man replied. "They never do. Just suggested it'd be better if he sold papers somewhere else. Somewhere quieter." Dean nodded once. "And you?" "I write for the same place," the man said, long enough to know when a door's closing. He held up the paper. "This won't run again." Dean didn't reach for it. "What about the family?" The man looked away. "There's talk. Nothing solid. Rent's late. Notices have started showing up." "How long before they're out?" "Sooner than they should be," the man said. Dean thanked him and continued down the corridor, his steps slower now. Outside, the night was sharper than before, the air cool enough to sting. He didn't head home. He didn't head to the bar. He drove without a destination until the strip thinned and the lights lost their rhythm. Later, in a quiet booth far from the stage lights, a familiar offer surfaced. It came through a mutual acquaintance. Polite, discreet, cash that didn't ask questions. "Things like this can be handled," the man said, stirring his drink. "You help them out quietly. Everybody stays comfortable." Dean listened. "And the rest?" he asked. The man shrugged. "That's not your problem." Dean stood, left the drink untouched. He spent the rest of the night moving through spaces where his name didn't matter. An office above a closed storefront, a kitchen table with paperwork stacked too high, a lawyer who spoke in careful phrases and never once promised success. By dawn, Dean understood enough. The family could be helped, but only in ways that would draw attention. Money alone would raise questions. Too much, too fast, from nowhere. The same system that had erased one man could just as easily mark his widow. When he returned to the casino later that day, he canceled a private appearance without explanation. The request was met with surprise, then irritation, then silence. Dean didn't fill it. That night, alone in his room, he sat without turning on the lights. The city pulsed outside, indifferent and endless. He wasn't thinking about fixing anything, just about one boy who had learned too early how easily people disappeared. Dean met the attorney in an office that looked temporary by design. No photographs, no diplomas on the wall, just filing cabinets that had been opened and closed too many times, and a desk scarred by old cigarette burns. The man himself spoke the same way the room looked, carefully, without decoration. "I'll give you the clean version first," the lawyer said. "Then the real one." Dean nodded. "Officially," the man continued, "the death was ruled a workplace accident. No safety violations. No criminal negligence. The casino's contractors followed procedure as written." "And unofficially?" The lawyer leaned back. "Procedure is flexible when the people writing it are the same ones paying to expand the building." He slid a folder across the desk. Dean didn't open it yet. "The worker wasn't a problem," the lawyer went on. "The schedule was. Corners get cut when delays cost more than lives." Dean finally opened the folder. Diagrams, reports, statements that said a lot without saying anything at all. "So the family has no case," Dean said. "Not in court," the lawyer replied. "Not the way the system's set up." Dean closed the folder. "What if they had help?" The lawyer hesitated. "Help how?" Dean didn't answer directly. "If money showed up, enough to keep them afloat." "That would be noticed," the lawyer said at once. Too quickly. The first question wouldn't be who helped. It'd be why. And the second question would be who put them up to it. Dean's jaw tightened. "They lost a husband and father." "I know," the lawyer said quietly, "and that's exactly why you can't fix this with a check." Dean left without shaking hands. Later that afternoon, he learned something else. The boys' family home sat on land marked for future acquisition. Not public yet. Not announced. Just a thin line on a planning document that assumed time would do the rest. Time, Dean thought, always did. That evening, through a third party, money was offered again. Cleaner this time. Routed through foundations with names that sounded generous and meant nothing. Dean declined. The message that followed was polite, almost friendly. "You're thinking too hard about this," it said. "People will start wondering why." At rehearsal, conversation stopped when he walked in. Not abruptly. Just enough to notice. A producer reminded him of upcoming dates. A manager asked if everything was all right. Dean said yes. It wasn't a lie. It was an omission. The pressure never arrived as a threat. It came as concern, as suggestions, as reminders of how easily things ran when everyone focused on their part. That night, Dean sat alone and considered the simplest option: writing a quiet check, leaving it to chance. He understood the risk now. If the family was accused of leveraging sympathy, they could lose what little protection they had left. Helping wrong could make things worse. For the first time, Dean had no clear move. He wasn't used to that. He'd spent years believing money could smooth almost anything. That influence came from visibility. Here, both felt dangerous. Somewhere in the city, a family waited without knowing who was paying attention or why. Dean folded his coat over the chair and stayed awake longer than he meant to, listening to the strip breathe through the walls, trying to find a way to act without becoming the story. Dean hadn't thought about the man in years. The name came back first, uninvited, while he was shaving. Not clearly, just a shape of a memory, rough around the edges. A voice that never rose. Hands that carried the weight of other people's complaints without absorbing them. A union man. Not the loud kind. not the ones who liked cameras or speeches. This one stayed in hallways and parked cars, places where decisions happened quietly. Dean had crossed paths with him in the early 50s, back when clubs paid in envelopes and promises, and stages were built by men whose names never appeared anywhere. Dean dried his face and sat down with the phone. It took 2 calls, then a pause, then a third number that hadn't changed. They met outside the city, in a diner that still smelled like coffee even when none was brewing. The man was older now, thinner. His posture hadn't softened. "I wondered when you'd call," the man said, sliding into the booth. "I didn't know if you'd remember me," Dean replied. "I remember people who listen," the man said. Dean didn't start with the boy. He didn't mention the casino. He spoke about a fall, about paperwork that led nowhere, about families left waiting for explanations that never came. The man nodded slowly. "That site again." "Again?" Dean asked. "Not the first time someone didn't make it home," the man said. "Just the first time it stayed quiet this long." He explained without drama how reports vanished between departments, how inspectors relied on summaries written by the same contractors they were meant to oversee, how fear traveled faster than truth among men who needed the next paycheck more than justice. "There are workers who'd talk," the man said, "but they won't step forward unless they know it won't end them." Dean leaned back. "What do they need?" "Time," the man said, "and leverage." Dean understood the second word immediately. He didn't call the casino. He didn't threaten anyone. He didn't ask favors. Instead, he confirmed a date. 1 show, 1 appearance. Publicly scheduled. Nothing unusual about it, except the timing. The same week the city was due to renew several operating licenses. The same window when officials preferred calm and predictability. The man watched him carefully. "You know what you're doing?" "I know what I'm not doing," Dean said. "I'm not saying anything." That was enough. The union filed a formal request for a review. Not loud, not accusatory, just thorough. It landed on the right desk at the right moment, when attention couldn't afford distractions. Suddenly, questions were allowed. Inspectors returned to the site. Not aggressively, methodically. Records were requested again, and this time copies appeared that hadn't before. Names resurfaced, not as headlines, but as entries that refused to stay erased. Dean felt the shift before anyone told him. A meeting was postponed. A call wasn't returned. A manager mentioned, casually, that one of his upcoming contracts might need reconsideration. Dean nodded and said nothing. He didn't attend the inspections. He didn't follow up with the union man. He understood the value of distance now. Being absent was part of the pressure. Late one night, back in his room, Dean stared at the calendar. One date circled. His show. He could still cancel. He knew that. Instead, he left it untouched. Sometimes the only leverage that worked was being exactly where you said you'd be, and nowhere else. The city didn't announce the change. It never did. There was no headline, no statement read into a microphone, no sense that anything unusual was happening. From the outside, Las Vegas moved exactly as it always had. Lights steady, traffic flowing, shows starting on time. But underneath that surface, something shifted. The review began quietly. Official language, routine wording. A licensing check tied to safety compliance, scheduled months earlier on paper and suddenly taken seriously. Inspectors arrived without notice, not as a spectacle but as a procedure. They asked for records that were assumed to be buried. They requested copies instead of summaries. They waited when answers came slowly. Construction on the new wing paused temporarily. No alarms, just a delay. Inside the files, a name reappeared. not prominently, not as a correction, simply restored where it should have been from the start. A worker previously listed as unidentified now had a full entry. Employment dates. Witness statements that had once been incomplete now attached. It read like an administrative adjustment. But adjustments had consequences. The family was contacted by a city office they had never heard from before. The letter used neutral phrasing, a request for clarification, a review of circumstances. At the bottom, a single line changed everything. Eviction proceedings were suspended pending reassessment. Nothing had been resolved, but nothing was moving forward either. Dean heard about it secondhand. Not through congratulations, not through thanks, through silence. No one mentioned his name. No one connected the timing out loud. The system did what it always did when forced to correct itself. It pretended it had chosen to. For a moment, Dean felt something close to relief. It didn't last. The cost arrived without drama. A manager called, voice carefully even. One of Dean's upcoming engagements was under evaluation, not cancelled, not confirmed, just set aside. Another conversation ended sooner than expected. A handshake didn't come when it usually did. He was becoming inconvenient. No one accused him of anything. That was the point. Accusations required responses. Distance did not. Dean walked the strip late that night, unnoticed in a way he hadn't been in years. He passed the casino where construction lights were dark now, machinery idle behind temporary fencing. Workers stood outside smoking, unsure whether to be annoyed or grateful. He didn't speak to them. Back in his room, Dean sat with the radio off, the curtains open. The city hummed like a machine correcting itself, gear by gear. He wondered if the pause would hold, or if everything would slide back once attention drifted elsewhere. He also wondered whether he'd already gone too far. The truth settled in quietly. The outcome was no longer his. He had pressed where pressure mattered, then stepped away. Whatever followed would follow without him. That was the risk of acting without ownership. Another message arrived the next morning. Polite, final. Just so you're aware, it said, there are limits to how flexible this town can be. Dean read it once and deleted it. He dressed for rehearsal as usual, adjusted his cufflinks, checked his reflection. Nothing about him looked defiant. That, too, was intentional. The city continued breathing. Somewhere, paperwork moved across desks. Somewhere else, a family slept one more night in their own home without knowing how fragile that still was. Dean stood still long enough to feel the weight of not knowing whether he had helped enough or too much. Then he left the room and went on with his day, carrying the quiet understanding that once silence starts working, it doesn't ask permission to keep going. The season had changed without asking anyone's permission. The air was cooler now, the nights cleaner, the kind that carried sound farther than expected. Dean left the casino through the same side door he always used, not out of secrecy anymore, but habit. Habit was honest. It didn't pretend. The alley was brighter than he remembered. A new lamp had been installed near the curb, washing the concrete in a steady white circle. Inside that light stood a boy, taller than before, shoulders straighter, coat buttoned all the way up. He wasn't calling out headlines. He wasn't pacing. He simply stood there, holding a single newspaper folded neatly in half. Dean slowed, unsure at first whether this was the same child or only the echo of one. Time had done its quiet work. The boy's face had lost the sharpness of hunger, replaced by something steadier, harder to read. They looked at each other without recognition. "Evening," the boy said. "Not selling, just acknowledging." Dean nodded. Evening. The paper didn't move. No offer. No gesture. Dean took a step closer. The front page was visible now. No photographs of stars. No bold promises. Just a modest column near the bottom, written in the language of decisions rather than drama. A long-closed case reviewed. A family compensated. New safety procedures approved for ongoing construction projects. No adjectives. No triumph. Dean felt the weight of the page before touching it. "That yours?" he asked. The boy glanced down, then back up. "It is." Dean reached into his coat. The boy held the paper out, then stopped himself. Looked at Dean again, this time more carefully. Recognition came late, like something remembered out of context. "You bought every copy once," the boy said. Dean didn't answer. "This one's on me," the boy added, almost reflexively, as if the sentence had been waiting for the right moment to exist. Dean shook his head slightly. "No." He placed the money in the boy's hand. Exact change. The boy hesitated, not confused, not resistant, just aware. He gave the coins back. Dean took them. They stood there a second longer than necessary. "Take care," Dean said. The boy nodded. "You too." No thank you. No explanation. No shared understanding spoken aloud. The boy turned and walked away from the light, footsteps measured, unhurried. He didn't look back. Dean remained where he was, the paper folded carefully now, edges aligned. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. The city moved on around him, engines passing, voices rising and falling. Somewhere music started up, muffled by walls. Somewhere a door opened and closed. Dean slipped the paper into his coat pocket, pressed it flat against his chest once without thinking, then let his hand fall. He walked into the darker stretch of the street, away from the lamp, away from the entrance, carrying nothing visible to anyone watching. Nothing loud had happened. Nothing anyone would talk about. But a quiet decision made months earlier had finished its work, and another one, just as quiet, had taken its place. Dean disappeared into the night, the way he preferred now, without witnesses.